This is the third day of notes from chapter 22, McGraw-Hill, and we're going to continue on talking about carbonyls. So this will be kind of the midway point through section 3. Carbonyls are C double bond O, and all of these functional groups that we're talking about the end of notes last time and this time all have the carbonyl. So C double bond O with something else on it. Now, last time we talked about esters, or about ether or ethers and aldehydes. So remind you that probably the easiest way to remember an ether, just throw this out there again, is that it's an O with an R group on either side. So an O in the middle and two R groups. Naming those, you're going to recognize it's ether. Write down what the left group is, write down what the right group is, and if they're different, then just say the alphabetical group first, and then the one that's alphabetically second, say that one second. And then we moved on. We talked about ketones. Remind you that the easiest way to remember that is that, of course, you've got a carbonyl, the C double bond O. That's the functional part. So that's the functional part of the key. And then you just think about, well, a ketone has an R on both sides, so it's like symmetrical, like this key, with a functional part right there. Now, do the two R's have to be equal? They're not really always totally equal. They might be different, but keep in mind just the general model has an R on both sides, so symmetrical. And then from there you can remember the aldehydes that aren't. They have an H on one side, and maybe an H on both sides, but they have at least an H on one side. And so we're going to move on and talk about carboxylic acids. This would be an R with an OH. So we have R, and then the functional group is C double bond O, OH, sometimes written as COOH, and that's the way you recognize it in a compound, because that's the way organic chemists write this when it's in a structure, COOH, and it kind of sends a red flag up that, hey, there's carboxylic acid. If it has two carboxylic acid groups, it's called a dicarboxylic acid. Could have three and be called tricarboxylic acid. Let's see, we're ready to move on. A little bit about amino acids there. Just a reminder, amino acids are the monomer that makes up polymers. The reason we're mentioning amino acids here is that an amino acid has an acid, carboxylic acid on one side, amino group on the other side with the C in the middle. I do want you to know the structure, be able to label the two parts, and also be able to show condensation reactions, how they come together. So alanine's a typical amino acid. This shows you the structure of alanine. If instead of the CH3 you put an R, then you have the generic structure for all amino acids. It's kind of like if the R is a wild card for what's different, everything else is pretty much the same. Amino group and an acid group. So we move on. We talk about esters. One of the hard things in this chapter is that there's so many different things to know, and some of them sound the same. So ether, esters, a little bit of similarity there. And, you just need to find some way to kind of chain these together. Esters are put together by an carboxylic acid and an alcohol. And you do that with a condensation reaction. So we're going to see the repeating theme over and over about how some of these things are used over and over. So on one side, we have the alcohol, and the alcohol loses an H, and carboxylic acid loses an OH. Water goes away, and then these two parts come together, and that's how we make an ester. Um, so I want you to know what two parts they're made of. That'll be a question on the test, and I possibly might, when I ask for a condensation reaction, this may be the condensation reaction I ask for. So look over that, know how they go together, and know the general structure. Esters are responsible for the aroma and taste in fruit. In your book on page 799, they show you pics of our pineapple and some cherries. Just like aromatic compounds tweak our nose, these esters are commonly found in fruits. And, just to kind of make a short story long here, we evolved, fruits evolved, we evolved around them. And the way they survived is that they got us and other animals to smell them and say, oh, there's a fruit, eat it, and then throw the seed away somewhere else so it didn't drop down at the same place where the plant was. Like a cherry tree. If it just dropped down and tried to grow there, it would grow in the shade of the other tree and wouldn't be successful. Which makes sense, because if the cherry trees all grew around the other tree, they'd leach the soil out and all the trees would die. So it's a method for attracting other animals to take the seeds somewhere else. And of course, our nose, we evolved, we wanted to be successful. If we ate cherries or fruit, we were successful and we survived. So at any rate, those esters are some of these remnants of things that help both of us survive. But those are the aromas that we see. So naming an ester, the ending, instead of like propane, you cross through the E and add O8. O-A-T-E. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing is that you need to find the side that has the not the O, but you put your finger on the double bond O and drop down to the C, and then go away from the O, and you count how many carbons, including the carbonyl carbon. So on this first one that you have, you'll notice that we drop down from the O, we go down to the C, and we see that we've got 1, 2, 3. So we say propane, 3 carbons, propane. Cross through the E, put in O8. So that's propanoate. Now we jump the O and look on the other side, and there's a methyl group. So it's methyl propanoate. So the middle one's ethyl ethanoate, just the same on both sides. And then we look at the right, they've switched it just so you don't get used to saying, well, it's always on the left or always on the right. Again, you put your finger on the O, drop down, and that carbon, there's only one carbon, so this is methanoate. Jump the O and name the group. The group is butyl, butyl methanoate. So practice naming those. Make sure that, if you go online and Google practice naming esters, practice naming carboxylic acids, there'll be just a wealth of different places where you can go to name those. I ran a bunch of those papers. The ones I give you on the test and quiz will either be from your review, your notes, or those practice pages I gave you. So be a good idea to go through as many of those as you can. Amides. So we're getting up on our last group, and there are other types of groups, but we're trying to cover the most common ones. Amides are carboxylic acid compounds where the OH is replaced by a nitrogen or amino group. So the NH2 group. Amides look like this general structure where it's an R, a C, double bond O, and instead of an OH we have NH2. But instead of NH2, we could have one of those H's or both of them replaced with carbon chains. So that would be first or second degree substitution. And, the naming, we'll go over a little bit of the naming if it's substituted like that. So one of the things I try to do on each of these is go over some important characteristics of each one. Like on the last one, esters, they're commonly the aroma found in fruit. When we look at amides, probably the most, for sure, the most common amide would be urea. And it is a carbonyl with NH2s on either side. This is because we digest proteins. When we digest proteins, ammonia is a byproduct. Ammonia is toxic to us. So our body creates these urea molecules from NH3, NH3. It takes off an H and sticks them both on there, and it's kind of like the dump truck, the waste truck that carries it away. Goes to our kidneys, removes that into our bladder, and it's removed from the body as urine. This urea, though, it is not toxic where ammonia is. Because of its high nitrogen content, urea is used as a fertilizer, also used in supplements in cattle food and other animals. So there's the structure of urea, and it's basically a carbonyl with amino groups on either side. As far as naming amides, they're based upon the 2 or 3 carbon chains that are attached, or if it is not substituted, like down at the bottom we've got ethanamide. Okay, so the ending instead of ethane becomes ethanamide, so we cross through the E and add amide, and if there's 2 carbons, with the NH2 on one side, there's 2 carbons, counting the carbonyl, ethanamide. If there are 3, propanamide, 4, butanamide. So it's not that difficult naming. Now, there are a couple of naming schemes. One of them is IUPAC. The other is the CA system. CA system's a newer one that they've tried to make a universal system for naming a lot of things since they felt that there were so many different systems out there. So we've got an example of that here. Notice that we have the ethanamide molecule. This time we've taken a carbon off, so it's methanamide. We've got a C double bond O, no C's attached to it, so that's methanamide. And then we have double substituted on the nitrogen, and so we call it NN for nitrogen-nitrogen, dimethyl, because we've got 2 methyl groups on the nitrogen, methanamide. And that would be the naming for amides. Not going to get real complicated on the test or quiz, but I'm going to try to have a naming for each one, for each type. So we're going to revisit naming the amines, amino groups, and I've got just a little spread here. All of these rings on the bottom, I'm not going to give you any of those on the test. I just gave you some examples of some things that you might have heard of: pyrimidine or pyridine, aniline. Those are some common names. You know, you probably in your circles, you're not going to hear them a lot. So here it shows you the IUPAC names, which is what we're going to stick with for the most part. Try to do IUPAC naming. There is also the CA name, so you get to see the difference there. So we have on the first one, 1-aminobutane, and this is, remember, aminos, amines, so we're taking a step back to yesterday's lecture. So how do we figure this out? Well, we see the NH2, and we count 4 carbons. 1, 2, 3, 4, bute, and it's butane, and we put a number and tell where the amino is. 1-aminobutane. So the next one, we have a 1, 2, 3 carbon chain is the longest chain, so it's propane. We write the word propane, and then we look at it and say, well, let's see, we've got on the second carbon, we've got an amino, and on the second carbon, we've got a methyl. So it's 2-amino, 2-methyl, propane. As we move on, we've got 1-methylamino-propane, so we can't count all 4 carbons since they're not all connected, but we do have on the end, we have a methyl group attached to the nitrogen. So for the IUPAC name, that's 1-methylamino, that's the group, propane. If we look at the CA name, which is the certified system, it's N-methyl propanamine, and they do the N to tell you that there's a methyl attached on the nitrogen. I won't count either one of the systems incorrect. If it's a multiple choice question, obviously you'd need to know the IUPAC name. So look over these. You should be able to recognize first, second, third degree amine. Look at the end, how many C's are connected. 1, first degree. 2, second degree. 3, third degree. So we're going to talk again about condensation reactions. You will, on the test, have a condensation reaction, and more than likely it'll be an amino connecting to an amino acid connecting to amino acid. So know how to draw an amino acid. There will be a question on there one way or another where I'll have you draw an amino acid, label any functional groups present, which would be the amino and the carboxylic acid group. But here, notice that the OH on the carboxylic acid and the H on the amino go away as water, and then the two parts come in together. And that makes what we call a dipeptide. There's two of the amino acids together. We call that a dipeptide. If there's more than two, generally it's a polypeptide. So that finishes up the third day of notes. I know that we had some folks out, so I made sure that we put this out. Go through your practice pages, make some flashcards. It takes a lot of work to do well in this chapter because there's so many different things happening. Work hard and do well. Good luck.